नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव देवीं सरस्वती व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु पुत्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवते उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकीः. Hare Krishna. So welcome you all to this morning Bhagavad Gita class. Today we are reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 18, text 20. I read the sloka. सर्वभूतेषु येनैकं भावम् अव्ययम् ईक्षते अविभक्तं विभक्तेषु तज्ज्ञानं विद्धि सात्विकम्. Translation goes like this: that knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुर्मीलितं येन सर्वे तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. नमो विष्णुपादकृष्णपस्ताय भूतले श्रीमद्भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिने नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. मोहन करो दिवाचलन पंगम नटे देवेंद्र पात्मा मंदिर श्री गुरु जनता परमानंद मातु श्री चैतन्य ईश्वर. Hare Krishna. So here in this verse we find Lord Krishna telling Arjuna that knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. So in these three slokas, today we'll discuss the 20th one, where it is explained what is knowledge in the mode of goodness. So there is one spirit soul in all the individual bodies. And this is spirit soul is a part and parcel of the supreme soul, that is Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna being having a spiritual body comprised of Sat, Chit and Ananda, that is eternity, bliss and knowledge. Similarly, the part and parcel that's the spirit soul in each and every body is also by nature, by constitution, Sat, Chit, Ananda. Now, this spirit soul is there in all the bodies, irrespective of whatever form the body is. Now, it may be a body of a demigod, it may be a body of a human being, it may be a body of an animal, or it may be a body of a bird. The soul is the same. Only the external manifestation of the body is different, that is dependent on one's work, which will come to a little later. So, there is another quote that is given in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text 18, which says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Kavi Hastine Sunichaiva Sopakicha Pandita Samadarshinaha. So the translation is, the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and a gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, or a dog eater. The meaning is that humble sages here means devotees. Devotees, by virtue of their true knowledge, they see with equal vision everyone. Who are the one? Whether it's a learned Brahmana, or a cow, or an elephant, or a dog, or a dog eater. The point is that both the slokas have one thing in common, that a person in knowledge or who has got true knowledge looks at all the living beings as one and the same. When we say one and the same, look all the living beings as one and the same, the living entity in each of these bodies is the same, that is Atma is the same. And the nature of the Atma is also the same. The only thing is that the individual soul, being a part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, is a minute, very fragmental part. So it has got, to a certain extent, the qualities of the Super Soul also. And also it has got a minute independence. There is one difference in both of them, that is the individual soul is conscious only within that particular body, whereas the Supreme Lord, as a super soul, is conscious of all the bodies. That means the individual soul that is there in my heart is conscious of only my body. It is not conscious of others' bodies. Whereas the super soul is conscious of all the bodies of all the living species, all the species of life, the super soul is conscious of. That means I know what is happening in my body. I will not know what is happening in others' body. But the Lord is a super soul who is all pervading. The reason he is called as all pervading, because that is also a quote in Bhagavad Gita. It says, everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, his head, spaces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. That means the example is given just as the sun diffuses its unlimited rays. So the Lord, as the super soul or the supreme personality of Godhead, in his all pervading form, exists in all the individual living entities, beginning from Brahma to the smallest of ants. That means the Lord is present as the super soul in all the living beings, and he is one super soul. Not that there is an individual super soul in each and every living being. No. So there is one soul, individual, which is one in the individual form, species of life, form of life, which is conscious of that particular form, and there's a super soul who is all pervading, who is conscious of all the living beings. That means this super soul, who is all pervading, he knows the what is going on in the mind, in the thoughts, in action, in words, etc., of all the species of life everywhere. That is why it is said that all everywhere are these unlimited hands and legs. So this is the difference between the soul and the super soul. Individual soul is pervading through one body, while the super soul is pervading all through in all the bodies. And one who sees the super soul accompanying this individual soul in a body and understands that neither the soul nor the super soul within the body is ever destroyed, actually is a true seer. That means one who has the true knowledge, or one who sees the right perspective, is the one who knows that their soul or the super soul are indestructible, whereas the material body is destructible. So we have a body which we have got birth due to our previous work, and that has got the body has got a beginning, it grows and then it matures and then it dwindles also and finally ends in death. So all the forms of material bodies in this material world, right from Brahma to even the smallest ant, they all live for some time. The time span varies from species to species, and then they all have to die at one point of time. So this is what happens to the material body, which is destructible, whereas the soul that is inside the body is indestructible. And the true seer is one who knows this fact. The Jivatma, that is the individual soul, can never be the same as the super soul, which normally Mayavada philosophers say. Mayavada philosophers normally say that Jivatma and super soul are the same. They are not the same. They are one and different. When we say one and different, Achintya Beda Veda Tattva, that means the qualities of both the individual soul and the super soul are the same, but the quantity is different. The super soul is huge, big, whereas the individual fragmental soul is a small part and parcel. So he has got in a minute degree the qualities which the super soul has got. And the super soul is all pervading everywhere. Though the Lord is eternally present in his Goloka Vrindavan Dham and playing his pastimes there, he is also pervading in the all. He is present in the all pervading form as the super soul, the entire cosmic material cosmic manifestation. This quote is also given in Brahma Samhita, where Lord Brahma says, praise, he says, Ananda Chanmaya Rasa Pratibhavidabhis Tabirya Eva Nija Rupataya Kalavihi Goloka Eva Satya Kilatma Bhuto Govindamadi Purusham Tamham Bhajami. He says, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of ecstatic potency possessed of 64 artistic qualities. And the extensions of his body is there in the material world. This actually, in each and every body in this material world, there are two things. One is the soul, and the other one is the body, its material body itself. The soul is spiritual in nature, and it is because of the presence of the soul, the material body is living. The material body is made up of material elements, which also there is a quote in Bhagavad Gita, which says earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these constitute, the Lord says, are my separated energies. That is the material body that we have. It is formed of these gross and subtle elements. The gross elements are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And the subtle elements are mind, intelligence, and false ego. So all our material bodies of these are made up of these gross and subtle elements. And plus, apart from this, there is a superior energy which is the individual soul, which also the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 7.5. He says, besides the, after this gross and subtle element, the Lord says, besides these, O mighty Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mind, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. That means the body which is made up of these gross and subtle elements is of a inferior material nature, whereas the superior soul, that is the Atma, which is present in each of these bodies, is a superior energy of the Lord Himself. So all are energies of the Lord, but the spirit soul is of a higher nature, whereas the individual soul, the material bodies are comprised of gross and subtle elements, which are of an inferior nature. And it is because the presence of the soul that the body functions. And when we say what we call as death, the soul has left the body. That is what is called death. Now, all these bodies are different in terms, the 84 lakh species of life in the material world. And all these bodies are given by Lord Brahma depending on their previous work. There is a quote in that also in Bhagavad Gita as to how the living entity in the material world carries its different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aroma. So normally we see the air carries the aroma that whenever we pass through. In a garden, we see some nice, pleasant flowers. We see the smell, a nice, beautiful, pleasant smell. Somewhere else, the pleasant smell may not be very good, where there's a lot of garbage. So it is the air that carries the aroma. Similarly, the Jivatma, which is there inside our body, transmigrates from one body to another, from one species of life to another, based on one's previous life. And at the end, he quits his body to take another one. And how it takes place is also mentioned that the jiva, or the individual soul that is there in our body, due to his independence, he has got control over his body, minute independence, he's got a control of his body. So, whatever consciousness that one practices throughout the life, that takes him over to the next body. So, in that individual body, he has got a decision to make whether if he wants to, by performing pious activities, he can become a demigod. By performing uh, impious activities, he can become an animal or a bird, whatever it is. So whatever consciousness is there that one has practiced, that is what is called previous work. So today we have got this body because of our previous work. And whatever we are doing today or practicing today, consciousness, that will be our next body. So if one practices Krishna consciousness or is always thinking of Krishna, remembering Krishna by chanting, hearing, etc., he will remember Krishna at the time of death, and he will go back to the Atma, this individual soul will go back to the spiritual world where there is no birth, death, old age, and disease. And it is because that we have a material body, we are all subjected to birth and death. And another very important one that is mentioned is that this soul has no birth, no death. They are eternally existing, they were always eternal, and they will be always eternal. There is no birth and death for this spirit soul, which is also mentioned in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which says that the soul cannot be burnt, it cannot be, it is indestructible, and there is no force that can bring death to this soul. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain, but the body is slain. That means just as a person puts on new garments by discarding the old one, similarly the soul accepts new bodies and discards the old and useless ones. The soul can never be cut into pieces, it can never be burnt by fire, and it cannot be moistened by water, and it cannot be withered by wind also. So there is a difference between the soul and the body. The individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble, and can never be burnt or dried. He is ever existing, present everywhere. That means present with that individual body. He is unchangeable, he is immovable, and eternally the same. So this, whereas the body is subject to destruction. That is what we call death. And knowing this difference between the body and soul, he is the one who has got this true knowledge, which is called knowledge in the mode of goodness. So one who has got this knowledge knows what is the soul, what is the super soul, and the soul being a part and parcel of the Lord, eternally its constitutional position is to serve the supreme soul, that's the supreme Lord. Just as the hand is meant to serve the body, the hand cannot say that I will take food for myself only. So every part of the body is supposed to serve the supreme, the total body. Similarly, all the individual souls or the Jivatma are meant to serve the supreme soul or the supreme Lord. That is their constitutional position. And they are all eternally Satchitananda. Their soul has got eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And when one engages in devotional service, one attains the real knowledge, that is the true knowledge. One knows his eternity also, and also remains blissful in the course of performance of this devotional service. So that is why the soul is called eternity, bliss, full of eternity, Satchidananda, eternity, blissful and full of knowledge. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. If any of you have got any question or comment, I can take it in the next 1 or 2 minutes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
This individual soul and super soul, when they enter the body, do they enter simultaneously or they enter at different times?
The super soul is always
And
existing.
leave simultaneously.
The super soul is always all pervading. It is one super soul that is existing in the entire material manifestation. So when the soul actually what happens, it by its subtle body carries one from one body to the another. And the super soul is already there along with the individual soul. It is not that the super soul enters into that, it is always there. So when the individual soul takes up another body, the super soul already is present there because the super soul is all pervading. He does not leave uh, uh, like the individual soul from one body to another. Super soul is ever existing, always pervading everywhere in every corner of the nook and corner of this material manifestation. So the super soul is aware of that, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, the super soul is aware of the consciousness of all the bodies. So the moment an individual soul enters into a material body, the super soul is already aware of it because it's all pervading.
So super soul is already there when the embryo is forming. Super soul is there in the first cell.
Yes, Mother.
So only when the individual soul enters at a later time.
Yes.
Okay.
The individual soul enters into another body, but the super soul is already aware even the moment the individual soul enters a body.
And by leaving the body?
The super soul is aware because he's all pervading. The individual soul has left and the body is dead. But the individual super soul is aware of what is in that body. He's aware, he's conscious of that dead
Super soul
body.
also leaves, no? Super soul also leaves.
Yeah, the super soul does not have to leave the body like the individual soul because he's all pervading.
Okay. Understood, Prabhuji. Understood.
Yeah, he's conscious of everything everywhere. That's why it is mentioned here, he's got thousands of legs and arms. It is an analogy given to understand that the super soul is ever existing and all pervading everywhere. Every nook and corner of the material manifestation, the super soul is aware.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Just a clarification. Like the super soul goes with the soul at the time. It is always accompanying the soul, no, Prabhuji?
Soul. Yes, that means it is not that it is a physical accompaniment like what we imagine. The super soul is all pervading.
So, like, even like as you mentioned now, like at the time of death, like when the soul
Yes.
leaves, it knows that it's leaving, but then how do you understand that it is accompanying the soul?
The
I mean,
soul,
will it-
because just like I give an example about air carries aroma. Similarly, the
yes,
soul's
Prabhu. But
duration. Once again, yeah, tell me.
sorry, but
Ask me.
I mean, the aroma is in the wind, right? So with the soul, the super soul is there, or it is just the feel of it, the breeze of it.
Super soul is already there throughout the cosmic manifestation. The super soul is already existing. The super soul doesn't have to exit a different body, one body, and enter into another body to be aware, because it is all pervading. The super soul is aware of everything that is there. But the individual body, due to the subtle body, goes from one form of light to another form. But the
Yes.
super soul is already existing in that also. Even if you see a mountain, the super soul is existing in that mountain also. Consciousness may not be there, but the super soul is already existing everywhere. In fact, this whole universe or planet is floating because the presence of the Lord as the super soul of the universe, which is Garbhodra Sai Vishnu.
Yeah.
Is it clear, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, Prabhu.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna,
Hare-
Mataji. Dandavat Pranam. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. No, Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am.
Prabhuji, one question, Prabhuji.
Yes,
That
Prabhu, please.
yeah, Lord is saying that the spiritual means the spiritual nature, the super spiritual soul is it's one, and it is divided into numerously, right?
Can you clear the question a little more clarity, with more little more clarity?
Yes, Prabhuji. Like in the sloka, it was said, no, Prabhuji, like that knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities. So they are
Yes,
divided in numerous form. So it is
yes,
already undivided, but we are saying it
yes.
is divided, right?
No. One who thinks these are not, the soul cannot be divided into pieces. These souls are eternally fragmental part and parcel of the Lord that have been existing in the spiritual world and will continue to maintain its individuality. So it is not subject to division. Like materially, we might think that one super soul has one soul has divided into so many fragments and enters into each and every body. All these individual fragmental parts and parcels are eternally existing all throughout. So they are eternal. So they cannot be divided. That is why I said a person who sees one spirit soul in every living being is one who possesses the knowledge of goodness. Because many times there are other philosophers who say that the soul has got divided and it is the same as God. So individual soul is different, the super soul is different.
Oh, okay, brother. Means
Is it
yeah.
clear for you?
Means when we go back to Godhead, it is like we are one, right? It is the same way.
Our individuality, even when we go back to Godhead, remains as an individual soul. But the only thing is, it will be always constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, which is its constitutional position.
Okay. Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I got a little
Hare Krishna.
confused. Please clarify this. You mean to
Yes.
say when a person dies, the individual
Uh,
soul leaves the body and the super soul is yet in the body, Prabhuji?
yeah,
Or he
because the
also
super
leave?
soul is present all over.
And then which super soul accompanies the individual soul, Prabhuji? I heard that the super soul
See,
accompanies the individual soul till the destination of.
when we say the super soul accompanies the individual soul, the super soul is already existing, all pervading everywhere. So the super soul is already aware. It does not actually the understanding is that the super soul accompanies the individual soul. Means the super soul is already aware of where it is going, what is within the consciousness. That is why it is said that super soul's consciousness in all the bodies. So it is not like an individual soul is entering, a super soul is also physically entering. No, super soul is already conscious of that body.
Prabhuji, when we burn the body, the super soul is yet inside the body.
Yeah, the super soul is all pervading, but the super soul cannot be burned. Just like the individual
That's why I'm
soul
little
cannot
confused.
also be burned, The super soul cannot be born.
That time it leaves the body, Prabhuji, the super soul.
Individual souls leaves the body. Super soul is all pervading. Super soul doesn't have birth. Lord does not have birth or death. Even the soul doesn't have birth or death. Only the soul leaves the body and enters into another material body.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you.
Is it clear, Mataji? Because I read out that sloka also, which says that 1,000, many hands and many legs. That means the Lord, as an all-pervading feature, is present throughout the cosmic manifestation.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
And
Hare
this
Krishna.
super soul facilitates the individual soul from leaving one body to and entering into another body. We should not physically imagine that the super soul is carrying the individual soul from one body to another. But the super soul is aware and it facilitates the individual soul to enter into another body.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji.